Hi, folks. I know we've got some more people joining us, but great to see you. Heidi from Denmark. Hi, hey. You're there. Good to see you. And we've got Jeff in Cyprus, my dad in England, Gunilla, and then John in Ghana, and Scott in Las Vegas, Nelly in New Netherlands, the Netherlands. That's the real name, not Holland. The real name is the Netherlands. That's correct, isn't it? Anyhow, I'm going to share today. I'm not sure if Gunilla will share anything or not, but I'm going to take the main portion of it. I know that Helene King is actually in Vancouver. She was in Alberta, Calgary, Alberta. I believe that's correct. And she's gone off to Vancouver, which is right on the west coast of Canada, to actually be with a friend there. Not sure if she's going to be able to jump on this morning or not. I want to spend some time today talking about what I've called the fruitfulness of love. And I think this has been kind of preparing and percolating in my heart for quite a while. And I was really inspired by a friend of mine called Richard Jones, who's also part of Father Heart Ministry. Richard has shared a couple of times on Sue Dorks's Zoom calls, and I was actually with Richard. I had breakfast with him a few weeks ago in London, and just love the guy. But he shared a number of months ago about the process of death, and I'm going to be speaking about that in the context of speaking about the fruitfulness of love. And as I develop this, I'm sure you'll start to see the connection between both, because they both, one comes from another. I want to start off in scripture by looking at something that Jesus says in John chapter 12 and verse 24. John chapter 12 and verse 24. Jesus says, "Most assuredly, I say to you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the ground and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it produces much grain." If it dies, it produces much gain. I actually want to read that from the Passion Translation. Nowadays, when I read something in the New American Standard, I always want to just check up the reference to it in the Passion Translation, because I just like the way they're actually able to develop it. So in the Passion Translation, it says, "Let me make this clear. A single grain of wheat will never be more than a single grain of wheat unless it drops into the ground and dies, because then it sprouts and produces a great harvest of wheat, or because one grain died." The first thing that I want to pull out here is that what's interesting about this is that not so much about the seed, but rather about the soil. And one thing that we know about the chemical makeup of the earth, the soil in which we bury and put in plants and seeds, etc., grain and everything else, is that soil is basically an amalgamation of all sorts of death. And we put it in this place and it germinates, it grows, it produces that which it was actually put in this earth to produce. Now, I find that so interesting because, you know, one of the things that I've seen in my life is that God uses death, and God uses the context of us dying to produce all sorts of things in our lives, things that, you know, we couldn't in ourselves, in our own strength and our own ability, actually produce. Now, I felt, and I really, you know, say this with a sincere heart, that I've been dying. Now, not obviously I'm dying, passing away sort of thing, but I actually feel that there's a number of areas in my life where God is really allowing them to die. They're really being put to death. And being honest with you and open and vulnerable, I've actually found that really quite difficult. And it's almost like what was there before is not here now. And that has created all sorts of sense of insecurity and fear and anxiety in my life that wasn't actually there before. And I found that really, really difficult. A couple of years ago, I was doing and preparing to do a conference in a place called Portersfield in California, in the Central Valley in California. And there was a couple of Father Heart friends that I had that had a contact with this church, and I go to this church to do this conference. And that on the Friday, I was actually talking to a friend of mine in Father Heart Ministries on FaceTime. And we were just talking about the process of letting things go and letting things die. And as my friend was actually saying that, I actually had a very, very clear vision that was a little bit scary to me. Because in this vision, I actually saw a lot of places, churches, ministry sessions, or ministry areas that were just being put into this grave. And it was almost like I'm standing on the edge of the grave, getting to say my final goodbye. And it was a death process. It was a letting go process. And it wasn't necessarily that easy for us, because I've realized and known that a lot of times in ministry, we can look for and expect our identity to be defined by what we do. In other words, if you've got an anointed ministry, you're a good speaker, you travel, and all sorts of things like this, that a lot of who you are is formulated by what you actually do. Now, obviously, we know something different, because in the New Testament, who we are is not defined by what we do. It's defined by the fact that we are his sons and his daughters. We get to know God as Father, walk with him as Father, and that formulates our true identity, which I believe is the way that God intended it. But in this one particular vision, I actually realized that God was really dealing with something in my heart, and really letting me come into a place where I had to be willing to let things go. I like what Denise Jordan said. We're at the summit, the Father Heart Summit, 2 years ago now. It seems like yesterday, but at the Father Heart Summit, one of the statements she made, which was very profound, she said, "Don't waste a good death. Don't waste a good death." And Denise is one of these people that can get away with saying something like that. But now I'm starting to, in some way, starting to understand and relate to what she's saying, because when God starts to deal in our hearts, we mustn't waste that opportunity of what he's actually doing, because he has a greater purpose in our life. Hence, this idea of what we call the fruitfulness of love. So this week, I revisited a couple of videos on the Desert Fathers. And one of the most famous Desert Fathers was a man called Saint Anthony. And he was born in around 251 AD. And even though he'd come from a very affluent, well-to-do family in Egypt, he realized that the gospel was all about surrender, relinquishing what we have, giving it up, dying to the world, and then letting God do really what he wanted him to do. And so this man, actually, St. Anthony, went up into the Egyptian desert, and there's plenty of it, and basically lived, almost like a hermit there, in the desert, in the rocks, in the mountains. And only at very specific times did he actually come out of where he was. But the history shows us that when he comes out an incredible anointing and life and love on his life, and literally communities are turned upside down by what he says, because in that place of solitude where he was, God had done such an incredible work actually in his heart. I've come to realize as well is that the desert brings us to a place where our heart motives and dependencies are exposed. The desert brings us to a place where our heart motives and dependencies are exposed. Now, I've really felt that over this last 18 months. We've, don't get me wrong, we've enjoyed the rest, and we've done a few other things, but in that process, a lot of heart motives and dependencies have actually been exposed actually in my heart. And I believe now, actually looking back, that those heart dependencies and some of those inner motives in my heart perhaps would not have been exposed if we'd have just continued on at the rate and pace at which we were actually doing things. So to slow down, to stop, even though circumstances completely changed, and it was obviously very difficult, in that whole situation, God takes that whole situation and exposes motives and inner dependencies that he really, really, really wants to deal with. And 3 areas in my life, really, I believe the Father has really pinpointed. One is the area of loneliness. Another area is the area of acceptance. And the other area is an area of fear. And I realized that all these the three that I just mentioned there, have actually come to light because of the situation that we've actually found ourselves in. This desert kind of scenario that we've actually found ourselves in has brought us to this place of me personally finding out that this is something that's really going on in my heart, and that the Father really wants to come to in a very special way. I remember a few years ago, and I often talk about this when I talk about being a child. I remember a few years ago, it was back in Sweden, and we all of a sudden found our children back at home with us. We just rented this house in Sweden, and children are like boomerangs. You send them out, but they come back, and you just wonder how many times they're actually going to come back. But that particular winter, they all came back. Hannah was already with us, but the 2 boys, one from America, one from Germany, found their way back home to us to be with us in Sweden. And I'm thinking, God, how are we going to survive? Because I saw the way my boys ate, and they're both really big guys. Joseph, like the second born, is like 6'3", and he's got huge, as a fisherman, he's got huge arms and shoulders. David, who's a plumber, it's like their guns are huge, and they don't exercise, they just work, and that's their natural physique. And so putting things in the refrigerator, or the things that we put in the refrigerator, didn't stay there very long. And they would be making all sorts, they'd be making curried pizza and all sorts of things. And it started to worry me. It started I started to feel anxious about, have we got enough money? How are we going to do this? And I took that to God. And in my dialogue with God, I felt like the Father said to me, every area in your heart, Andy, that fears has not surrendered to love. And I thought, wow, God, that's really good. Well, of course it's good. It comes from God. But I saw that in my heart. This recent season with the loneliness, this recent season, just with the area of acceptance, and fear as well, I realized that these are areas where the Father really wants to get to with his love. The fear really became very evident to me when the situation happened with my back, and I was afraid. I really was afraid. I didn't want to be afraid. I tried not to be afraid, but literally when you feel like your whole body's almost paralyzed, you can't move, and you're in excruciating pain, I actually was afraid, and I didn't know what was going to happen or how it was going to be worked out. But that was just another sign there that these areas of fear are actually coming up in my heart, coming to the surface. And so I have revisited some of Richard's teaching, Richard Jones's teaching. And when he taught on death and the process of dying, he related an article that he'd read on the BBC website by a lady called Elizabeth Grubler-Ross, I believe her name is, and it's called The Rise and Fall of the 5 Stages of Grief. The fall and rise of the 5 stages of grief. And then when I read over this again this week and looked at it again this week, I'm just shocked how relevant this is for what God is doing in our hearts, how relevant it is in terms of how the Father is using that. And it's so true as we're walking out this revelation that God is actually our Father. Now, the first stage, he talks about 5 areas: the rise and fall and the 5 stages of grief. The first stage is denial. When something starts to happen in our heart, oh God, that's not really happening. It can't be me. It can't be true. It's somebody else. No. And so we kind of, brush it off. It's like when this back thing happened, and I'm thinking, oh, I'll just do a few little exercises and a few little exercises, and I get my back moving, I'll be okay. The next day, this was before I went to California and I ended up in hospital, I thought, well, I'll go out and cut the lawn, do the grass. But that was probably the worst thing for me to do. But it was part of the denial. It was part of, this is not really happening. It can't possibly happening. And I just need to get on with life and kind of ignore it. And we kind of do that, don't we? We kind of do that when the Father starts to work in us. And because we kind of want to very subtly kind of push him back. And what we're kind of saying is, God, I'm actually in control of this. You really don't need to step into this. I'm kind of in control of this. And I'd rather you just step back a little bit. I will manage it. And I've come to realize that when love comes to us, that when the Father comes to us and breaks in our heart, the reaction that we often make or often do is this controlled mechanism to try and manage the scenario, to try to manage the situation. I don't need God there. I don't need God to working. I'm going to manage this and it's going to be okay. Well, that's part of the denial. We're going to deny it. It's not happening. It's not real. I'm going to manage it. And I'm going to get through this. Like I've got through it every other time in my life, I'm going to get through this. Well, the second stage is the stage of anger. And that is epitomized by a statement, why me? Why is this happening to me? And back to the situation with my back, I'm thinking, as it progressively got more serious, or more painful, more discomfort started to happen, I'm thinking, why is this happening to me? I've got to do a wedding in 6 days' time. This is a crazy time for this to happen. Why me? And I believe that in that statement, anger is coming forth, but the anger is coming forth from this place where we're starting to realize that we really haven't got much control over this situation. We really haven't got much control over this situation. God, is something happening in our life. We deny it to start with, and then we're getting angry. And one of the reasons we're getting angry is because we cannot control it. And I've felt that. I've felt that in my own heart when situations are coming up, when life is happening and it's difficult, it's painful. I'm just angry, and I'm angry because I cannot control it. And this is what happens when love really starts to break in to the deepest areas of our hearts. Why me? Because the anger is starting to come up. The third area is quite intriguing to me. I can see myself so clearly in this. Is the area of bargaining. Okay, see, it's our attempt to postpone death, perhaps with good behavior, with good deeds. And I want to bargain about everything. You know, I will even bargain when I'm calling up to try and get an air ticket. I'll try and get it. You know, I'll try and bargain with the guy. I drove my dear wife absolutely crazy when we lived in Ghana. And John has probably seen me do this as well, that when you're out on the roads in Ghana, you're driving around the city, at every intersection where there's traffic lights and the cars have to stop, you'd have all these mainly young people, male and female, boys and girls, selling all sorts of goods, whether it be a soccer ball, a football ball, some sort of an alarm system, something. They had all sorts of things that they would be selling on the side of the road. It's unbelievable the type of stuff that they had, from newspapers to chewing gum to fresh oranges, everything was being sold on the side of the road. Why go to the supermarket? Just take a drive around the city and you'll get all the shopping you need. Well, oftentimes when we were in Africa, I wouldn't be driving. I'd let someone else drive, probably because of what it did to me. And then we'd meet these people at the traffic lights, and I would see something that I thought, well, I wouldn't mind having that. And then I'd have to negotiate. And what they would say to you in Ghana, you know, John will testify to this, and I say how much it is, and they'll say 100. And then I'll say to them, what's your last price? And then they'll say, my last price is 80. And I'll say, well, I'll give you 40. And then the last price would come down to about 60. But this would go on, and the traffic, you'd be stuck there for about 10 minutes. This could go on for a very long time. And it would drive Gunilla completely up the wall. And I'm trying to squeeze these guys. And I'm not being, you know, perhaps as nice as what I could be, but I kind of find it entertaining that you could bargain, and sometimes you can really get some really good deals on the side of the road. But you know what? I do that in life as well, not just in a case of trying to buy something. I do that when it comes to the issues of my heart. I bargain. I want to negotiate. I want to sit down and have a discussion and talk about it. And probably because I'm trying to push off or postpone the inevitable. I don't want the inevitable to take place. I'm pushing it off. And it's my attempt again to try and control this situation from the situation that's actually happening. We actually do that. We do that in our relationship with God because we're uncomfortable, we don't like it, and we start to kind of negotiate. And one of the primary ways in which we try to negotiate as believers when God starts to do an area of our life is that we believe and perceive that good behavior is our negotiating card. That good behavior is our negotiating card. We're failing to see the inevitable. We're failing to see what is actually going to come. And again, it's all our fear, it's all our insecurity is coming to service because the Father and his love is actually coming to us. The fourth area of the stage, the rise and fall, the 5-stage grief is depressing. Sorry, not depressing. It is depressing, but it's depression. And I've actually experienced some of that this year. I've actually experienced short times when I felt really low. And it's my reaction to the situation that I've got no control over. And I'm feeling this sense of desperation and lostness and what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen. And just feeling low, just feeling like trapped, nowhere to go. And it's our reaction to the situation. And I've known what that's like. And I know that Gunilla's talked about that before. She's faced that in the past as well. And it's almost like the realization of the lost area in our heart where we, just don't know how to deal with it. And I believe that when this depression often when it started to happen in my heart, it was at that place when I realized I'm actually starting to let go. And this depression really is also rooted in my fear, because in my fear, I actually fear letting go. I don't want to take my hands off the reins. And it's that struggle that's still going on in our heart. And when we let go, what I've started to find in my own heart is I've started to let go is that, the outward signs is the weeping, the crying, the realization that God is actually there, the realization that he loves me, the realization that there's something better. And that pulls me through, if you like, the depression or the sense of feeling depressed in that particular situation. And that leads right into the final one. The final one is acceptance. The final one is acceptance, that we let go, that we relinquish our need to control, that we come face to face with our fear, and we say, okay, this is my situation. There's nothing I can do about it. I cannot control it. I cannot change it. I accept it. And I let God do the rest. Now, in all these different points, all these different stages are really interesting. But the acceptance area, or the acceptance stage, is really quite powerful, because out of all these stages, this is the only one that we see witnessed in the life of Jesus. This final stage of acceptance is the only one that we see actually happening and witnessed in the life of Jesus. And that is in Luke 22, verse 42. In Luke 22, 42, it says, "Father, if it is your will, take this cup away from me." So we know and see there is a struggle. There's a very real struggle going on. And I cannot imagine the depth of that struggle that Jesus is going through. He is talking to the Father. He's just giving it all to the Father. And then he says, nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done. If you like, this was Jesus' acceptance. I'm accepting this responsibility with you now, Father. I'm about to die. I'm about to go to the cross. I'm about to be falsely accused, etc., etc. But I accept this journey that I'm actually on. I accept this journey that you're on. Just the other day, as I was praying and just talking with God about this, I really felt the Father say something to me. And this is what he said. If you allow me to walk with you through this, it will become the most fruitful time in your life. Now, I was struggling with things. I was struggling with feeling low. I was struggling with life, things that were going on. And I felt the Father actually say that to me, that if you allow me to walk with you through this, it will become the most fruitful time in your life. Now, when we're going through this, when we're going through these stages of life, as God is working, it's difficult to see the other side of the fence. It's difficult to see the resurrection. It's difficult to see fruitfulness in life. It's difficult to see hope. It's difficult to see joy. It's difficult to see all those other, attributes and all the fullness of life that God brings. It's difficult to see them because we're right in the midst of death. Our life is literally being buried, in one sense, in the soil. And are we ever going to produce something that the Father really wants to produce actually in our lives? But as I looked at this and spent time with this, I started to see something that in one sense, I believe is really prophetic. And we can turn to John's epistle, 1 John chapter 1 and verse 3, 1 John chapter 3, verse 1. I'm a little bit dyslexic and I put my 1s and 3s in the wrong place there. But 1 John chapter 3 and verse 1. Now we have this notion, this evangelical notion that when we meet with God, we're going to stand before the great white throne of judgment, and we're going to be judged. Our works are going to be judged. We are going to be judged, etc., etc. So we have this view and this concept of God that when we meet with him, we are going to be judged. Andy, this was right, but this was wrong. This was bad. This was not. This was okay. And he's going to list out all those things that we've done, etc., etc. And we have this continued notion of right and wrong when it comes to our relationship with God. This is right, this is wrong, etc., etc. Well, when we read this passage, we're going to just read it in just a few moments. One thing that we see, and one thing we will start to realize, is that when our heart meets with God, and when we meet with God, is God that actually changes us because we've met with him. We've encountered him. We've seen him. Okay? Now listen to what John says. And it's interesting because I believe what John says here isn't true for us just now in this earthly life, but it's also true when we are going to get to see him. It's not going to be about right and wrong. It's going to be about the powerful effectiveness of who God is and the intensity of his love actually changing our lives, which is a beautiful thing. And so this is what John said, behold, what manner of love has the Father bestowed on us, that we should be called children of God. Therefore, the world does not know us. Now, John is just laying something out there. He's putting a foundation in place. He's putting a perspective in place. Okay? And it says it didn't know the world. Therefore, the world does not know us because it didn't know him. Beloved, now we are children of God, and it has not been revealed what we shall be, but we know that when he is revealed, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. Now, what John promises us here is that we're not perfected, but we are being perfected. And we're being perfected by the very process of love into our hearts. And as our heart accepts things and is healed and is restored, and as we die, love is revealed to us. And as love is revealed to us, we become like him. Now, that is not just the process on earth for us in terms of our walking with God. That's also the process for us when we actually get to meet with God. That we die, we accept it, and when we see him, we will be like him. There's no mention there of, well, what about this, Andy, or what about that, Andy? No, love permeates every part of our existence. We become as he is. We become as he is when we meet him. And we become as he is. We become as he is because there's parts of our heart and life have actually relinquished, accepted things, have been put to death, and consequently, his life has come in and actually changed us. Now, we don't see that. We don't always comprehend that when we're on the wrong side of the grave. But what comes out of the grave is life, the fruitfulness of life, because we see him. John says in verse 3 of this passage, and everyone who has this hope in him purifies himself just as he is pure. The word judgment in the New Testament is from a Greek word that talks about putting asunder or separating. That when his loving judgment comes to us, it's not a heavy-duty time of correction and punishment. Rather, his loving judgment comes to separate, to bring the power of his love completely in our lives, to separate out everything that is not of him. That's what the Father does. That's what his love does in our hearts and actually in our lives. Also, in John's Gospel, John chapter 15, is a story of the true vine, and the Father, of course, is the gardener, Jesus is the vine, and there's these branches. You know, there's a lot of branches. And Jesus says, I am the true vine. I like that. Jesus is the life. He is the life. And my Father, he's working. The Father is working with the vine, but with this tree as well. That we're in Christ, that we're in Jesus. The Father is working as well in us. Every branch in me that doesn't bear fruit, he takes away. And every branch that bears fruit, he prunes that it may bear more fruit. Now, there's two things he does there. He sees the death in the branches and he cuts it off. Okay, I felt some cutting. I felt him cutting some dead, worthless twigs of my life, branches of my life. Now, I felt that. I felt that. That's uncomfortable. That's not particularly nice. I don't really like it because it's awkward. It's emotionally awkward. It's psychologically awkward. But then I've also experienced him taking the areas of fruitfulness and cutting them. Now that is where the bargaining starts. That's where the bargaining starts to trigger in. Come on, God, you know, I produced half a basket of fruit. You know, come on, surely half a basket's good for you. You know, surely that's worth something. That has great value. Surely we can get a few dollars for that. Where every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes. This is also a process of death because it's only the vine in the winter is going to be pruned in that season of time. And I felt that. I remember when we moved to Sweden, I thought at the time, we're doing something really crazy. In 2010, 11, and first part of 2012, it was an incredible, fruitful time for us living in California, preaching all around the country, and it was fruitful. And that's really the time when I got to know Scott, and the finances were good and things were going well, etc., etc. And we come out of a very difficult time. And now you're sending me to Sweden. And what's happening in Sweden, God? There's, you know, is this? And I felt like him taking those areas of fruitfulness and just cutting them. And just cutting them. And it's like when they cut, it's like they're all exposed. And it's going to take a while for greater area of fruitfulness, a greater production of fruit to actually come off that particular vine. But I think in my life right now, I feel both processes happening. I feel God breaking off and cutting off the dead fruit. I feel that. But I also feel God pruning the good fruit in me as well. So wherever you look, I'm being pruned. There's pruning happening all around. We should make a song with those words in it. And so I want to just draw to an end because I know Gunilla has a few things to say. And I think in conclusion, that in this process, in these stages of denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, when we accept that surrender to his love, we're going to see a fruitfulness in our lives that we could not even comprehend. The Father and his love, there's going to be a fruitfulness of love that's going to be far beyond anything that we could ever think or imagine actually in our lives. And the beauty of it is going to be him. There's going to be less of Andy left, which is actually a good thing. Gunilla. Can we turn Gunilla's mic on, Scott? It's on, Gunilla.
Yeah, that's great. Good to see you all. Yeah, I just wanted to maybe add a few thoughts that I had. I was teaching this week at the church here about, how we deal with circumstances. And I think we're all at different, we've had to deal with some circumstances these last 2 years that were new to most of us, and certainly to us. But change is something that we all need to live with. Things change. We don't like change. Most people would like things to stay the same, and they don't like change. Some people are maybe thrive on the change and chaos, but most people probably like things to stay the way they are, and they feel secure in that. But change happens. As we age, or working situation or family situation, there's always change. We deal with loss. We deal with letting go of things. So learning how to let go, it really is part of life. And I think some of us need to let go of things that we've held on to, even because we can hold on to things and stay in a situation, even though there's no joy in it anymore, or no life, or nothing really fruitful. But because we're comfortable, or because it is something we're used to, we just stay in it. And slowly we kind of wither away, and we wonder why we are depressed or whatever. So I think, God sometimes have to move us out quite forcefully, or he has to wake us up, and that's not always so good, or we don't feel good about that. I think Jesus faced some circumstances, and he had some advice to his disciples. This is right before he was arrested, and he had to go through all that. And so in John 16, at the end of chapter 16, verse 32, Jesus says this, but a time is coming and has come when you will be scattered, each to his own home, and you will leave me all alone. Yet I am not alone. For my Father is with me. I've told you these things so that you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I've overcome the world. So what Jesus is saying, that whatever circumstances or whatever difficulties or trouble that you're going through, that the Father, you are not alone, because the Father is with you. I'm not alone, because the Father is with me through whatever change is happening. And we can have peace. We can have peace. And I think when we let go of things, we learn to trust our Father more. And I think his goal in all these things, and I'm not saying that he brings trouble on us, so to say, but I think he is so interested in showing his love, and knowing that we are loved through those times of grief, through those times of loss, through those times of letting go of things. And so I think I try to focus more nowadays on, where is your presence and your love in this moment? Instead of looking for the solution, how do I fix this problem and get through this problem? And it's like, how do I live in peace and in the Father's presence through this time instead? So, with our perspective, and our approach and our attitude to things is important. And when we go through difficult times, then those are some of the things that come out of it. And I did a little teaching, I think it was probably last year on the Zoom, about this winter season, and I just want to read a couple of those things to you, because the winter season is the season of dying. It's the season when that seed goes in the ground, the tree loses all its leaves, and it looks dead on the outside. And what is happening underground, hidden away, where no one can see it. You know, and eventually that tree comes back. The leaves come back and the fruit comes back. But it is part of the life of the tree to lose leaves and to kind of go into hiding. And so, you know, when we are in a season like that, we feel ashamed. We feel like we have failed. We feel like we are not being fruitful and we're not doing great. And we feel ashamed of that. And we look at ourselves as somehow I'm just doing something wrong and I'm failing. Like I've missed it. Where did I miss it? Where did I go wrong? And we beat ourselves up and feel that it is our fault. But it's not. It is a legitimate process that God puts us through sometimes. And sometimes other people around you are not going to understand that either. They'll look at you and say, what's wrong with you? You know, snap out of it. Come on, let's go. Forget it. Don't, you know, just let go and move on. And it's not always helpful when we share some of these things with others because they don't understand where we're at. And for ourselves, we can feel like people don't really get it or people don't really understand what we're saying. So it's not an easy time. And sometimes, you know, the winter is, or that part is waiting. And if there's any impatience in you, you know, you don't like waiting. I don't like waiting. I want things to happen. I don't like the waiting season, but that's another one of those principles that we got to wait on the Lord and wait for the timing of things. So yeah, I see it. We are running. I have a few more minutes maybe. Yeah. We can feel really isolated and abandoned in those seasons when we're letting go of things. And we can even feel like God is not there. Like, where are you? Why do I feel like this? But he's there, and he's sometimes in the inaction of just waiting and being still, we actually grow, even though we don't see it. I think once we come out of something like that, we can actually see the fruit that comes out of this. And I think for all of us, we have to be willing to let God prune us, or the Father remove things. Because honestly, I'm glad of some of the things that I've let go of, but I don't really know that until afterwards. That, wow, what a relief. But at the same time, you want to hold on to it, something that you feel is familiar to you. And we feel unsure, you know, if we let go of something, if we don't know what we're going towards. I think Olav shared this picture of, you know, the boat leaves the shore, but it's going to be out in the open ocean without seeing anything until it's going to reach the other shore. And in that in between stage where we've let go of the shore and we're on our way, but we might not even see where we're going, in that stage is where we really need to know that the Father's with us, even though we maybe can't see how it's all going to land or how it's all going to turn out. So this whole process of letting go and dying to things really is a lesson in learning to trust in a whole new way, and learning that we can live in his love, we can live in his peace, no matter what's going on. So.
That's great, Gunilla. Thank you. Thank you so much. That was fantastic. I felt such a really strong anointing on this morning, and I really sense, you know, we haven't necessarily got a big crowd, but I'm sure other people jump on our YouTube site or on Facebook to check this out, because I really believe there's something really prophetic in this, that the Father is speaking to the church right now, to the body of Christ. But I just want to pray in conclusion. And obviously it's, I can see by the way you guys listening and watching that it's brought a depth of impact. So Father, I thank you for what you've been doing in our hearts and the process of how you're working and the process of your love, and that you are going to bring an incredible amount of fruitfulness to our lives. And so, Father, we say thank you. We don't always like it, but we say thank you that you're good. We love you, and we just thank you for I see your love just working in all our hearts, right across the world, Africa and Asia and Europe, Americas. I see you just working in our hearts in a very beautiful and deep way. And so, Father, just continue to do that. In Jesus' name. Amen. Just in closing, our website is, I'm just going to show you our website. We are actually going to go into a season of a fresh, we've sensed the Father speaking this, and come next year, we are going to be we are looking at going to a number of different nations and spending more time on the road. And one thing that we are going to be doing is encouraging people to pray about partnering with us as we go and partnering with the dream that the Father's putting in our hearts. But if you'd like to give today, make a donation, that's great. There's no pressure on you to do so. If God's put it in your heart, great. And all you do is click on that give button and follow the instructions on the website. Also, our YouTube channel is still there. You can check that out. All these things are put on our website, so you can see them again, YouTube, and also on our Facebook page, which is there. And I've been doing some weekly little videos about missions and just taking the Father's love to the developing world. They might be interesting to you. You can go on and check them out. They're actually on the Facebook page. So guys, we're going to be on again, all being well, next week. And we really look forward to seeing you. We're actually going to be in Myrtle Beach, but we will do our Zoom call at 11 o'clock. So really looking forward to being with you. Make sure you have a really wonderful, wonderful day. Thanks for joining us, and God bless. God bless.